On the night of October 1, 2020, a missing person bulletin flashed across every news screen in Idaho, but the story that would soon dominate headlines began 2 years earlier, when a woman named Lori Vallow declared that the end of the world was near and that she alone could shepherd her children to salvation. The chilling phrase, "Doomsday Mom," would soon become synonymous with a twisted faith that turned love into lethal obsession. Lori Vallow grew up in a modest Utah family, but by her early 30s, she had already drifted into a series of increasingly extreme religious circles. After a brief marriage to her high school sweetheart, Vallow claimed to have received a divine revelation that she was the chosen vessel to usher in the second coming. She adopted a new name, Shanti, and began posting cryptic verses about an imminent apocalypse on social media, warning that anyone who stayed with her would be condemned. In 2019, Vallow married Charles Vallow, a man with a criminal past who had recently been released from prison. The union seemed to be a chance at normalcy, yet it only deepened her paranoia. Within months, Lori convinced Charles that his own family members were agents of darkness, sent to sabotage her mission. She demanded that he cut ties, and in August 2019, she filed a petition to have him declared mentally incompetent, a move that would later be deemed a calculated attempt to gain control over his assets and his 2 children from a previous marriage. That same year, Lori met Alex Daybell, a charismatic Idaho rancher who preached his own brand of apocalyptic prophecy. Daybell claimed to be the second coming of Christ, and together the pair wove an elaborate narrative about a forthcoming flood that would wash away the sinful and leave only the faithful. They amassed a small, devoted following, and their homes became sanctuaries for those willing to abandon the world outside. The first tragedy struck in July 2019, when Charles Vallow vanished from his home in Chandler, Arizona. His disappearance was initially chalked up to a family dispute, but investigators soon uncovered that his body had been buried in a shallow grave on Daybell's property in Idaho. A year later, in September 2020, Lori's 2 children, 7-year-old Tylee Ryan and her 6-year-old half-brother, Joshua J.J. Vallow, vanished without a trace. The last known sighting of the children was a grainy surveillance video of Lori and Daybell loading a black Ford Explorer into the back of a pickup truck, a scene that would become a cornerstone of the prosecution's case. When the children's disappearance became a national story, the media dubbed Lori Vallow the Doomsday Mom. A public outcry swelled, and a massive search effort involving the FBI, the Idaho State Police, and volunteers combed the rugged terrain of the Sawtooth Mountains. In February 2021, a breakthrough came. A shovel and a plastic bag containing human remains were found in a remote area of the forest, and DNA analysis confirmed the remains belonged to Tylee and J.J. The discovery ignited a firestorm of legal action that culminated in a trial that captured the nation's attention. The trial began in June 2023 in the Idaho 4th Judicial District, presided over by Judge Robert M. Bruh. The courtroom was packed with reporters, believers, and grieving relatives, all awaiting answers to questions that seemed as impossible to untangle as the tangled web of religious rhetoric and criminal intent. The prosecution, led by District Attorney Jeff Dwyer, painted Lori Vallow as the mastermind who, fueled by apocalyptic delusions, ordered the murders of her husband and children to clear the path for her new world. They presented a trove of evidence, text messages in which Vallow warned Daybell that the police are coming, a series of financial transactions that funneled money from Charles's accounts to a shell corporation owned by Daybell, and the chilling testimony of a former cult member who described Vallow's nightly sacrament, rituals in which she claimed the children were sacrifices to the spirit of the flood. The defense, headed by attorney Christopher Jones, attempted to dismantle the narrative by arguing that Vallow suffered from severe mental illness, claiming she was not competent to stand trial. They introduced psychiatric experts who testified that Vallow's delusional disorder rendered her incapable of forming criminal intent. The defense also tried to shift blame onto Daybell, portraying him as the true architect of the murders who manipulated Vallow's fragile psyche. However, the prosecution countered with surveillance footage showing Vallow's hands loading a heavy bag, later identified as the children's clothing, into the truck, and a recorded phone call in which Vallow instructed Daybell to make sure they don't get caught. Over 6 weeks, the prosecution called over 30 witnesses, including forensic anthropologists who reconstructed the burial site, a digital forensics analyst who traced encrypted messages between Vallow and Daybell, and a former pastor who testified about Vallow's radical reinterpretations of biblical prophecy. Each piece of evidence seemed to tighten the noose around the duo, painting a portrait of premeditated murder cloaked in religious fervor. On August 30, 2023, after deliberating for 12 hours, the jury returned a verdict that sent shockwaves through the nation, guilty on all counts for both Lori Vallow and Alex Daybell. Vallow was found guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder, 1 count of conspiracy to commit murder, and 1 count of aggravated kidnapping. Daybell faced the same murder charges, along with additional counts of child endangerment. Subscribe to The Verdict for more stories like this.